about to have a conversation with someone who's truly unique. He has a doctorate in electronic system design, but he has an amazing knowledge base in the esoteric or mystical sciences. And I'm really interested in delving into the fount of knowledge that he is and understanding more about the design of being human, but actually the other side of being human, the highest possible self. So I have a ton of questions for him, and his name is Dr. Arjun Pai. We're talking about purpose of life. What do you consider to be the purpose of life?
Purpose of life is a very, very difficult topic to talk about in a discussion like this, because your purpose of life could be different from what my purpose of life is.
Really?
What you perceive life to be.
Yeah.
What are you here to do? So.
But what is the purpose of life, independent of someone's perception? What do you say life is for? Human life is for?
See, this is where I have a different spin on things, and this is what I have. I drift away a little bit when I say what is the purpose of life is. First of all, when I started with Jyotish, what really attracted me to Jyotish was the concept of Akashic records.
Okay.
And now, what are these Akashic records? These are etheric archives which are there, stored somewhere. Everything, every situation that you have, every moment is pictured, and that's why the karmic, the accountant of all your karmas, his name is Chitra Gupta. Chitra means picture, Gupta means secret. So he's secretly clicking your pictures all the time from different, and he's storing it, all of them, somewhere.
Okay.
Right? Now, many of us start leaving life, and we don't even realize, why are we here for? What are we here for? And then, sometimes you get it's a spark in your life, and suddenly you start thinking about, why am I going through all of this in this life? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Mm-hmm. And when you go very deep into Jyotish, you can actually see, the cycles of karma operating on you.
Exactly, yeah.
If I have to simplify this whole thing and say, what is the purpose of life is, I would simply say that knowing and being aware of who you are,
yes,
and why you are here for.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding the divine plan of God, or the blueprint of God, or your inner diamond that you call in your book. What is the inner diamond? What is that you're polishing? What is that you want to shine?
Yes.
So your quest in life has always been to understand what this inner diamond is,
yeah, and
you start polishing that diamond, because it could be an uncut diamond, but then you polish it, you go, unless you grind, and the roughness with which you're polishing,
yeah,
that actually gets you the sparkling jewel which comes out.
Exactly. See, for me, that's why I wrote these, because for me, in my own kind of inquiry into what is life for and the life purpose and stuff, it's really simple. I don't need, I've written 3 books, a trilogy, but I don't need a trilogy to explain it. I can tell you in one sentence. It is pure and simple to understand your personal humanity, which includes your karmas and all the rest of it. You may have to complete some of those, you may have to learn some new things and so on, but ultimately all of that serves to one purpose, and that is to become aware of and connect to the Antaratman. That is the inner diamond. That is just simply, that's what it is for all of us. Because the moment you start to do that, life takes on a whole other meaning. How we live, how we engage, what we do with ourselves, how we relate to people and everything else, and whether, the rishis talk about this ability to choose whether you come back in a different life or not. At that moment, when you really genuinely get it and you begin to experience an integration with it, and so much so that your own identity succumbs to the beauty of this brilliance that there is within, because it's so much better to be guided as a GPS, like a personal GPS, internal GPS, by this thing, by this intelligence, which is so beautiful, that the rational mind becomes more of a vehicle, like a car that you're driving, as opposed to the thing that drives you. So you're now driving it, or the inner being. So you're starting to live life from the inside out, as opposed to the outside in. Being given by that deeper essence. That's for me. That's for all of us. And it's some point we get to that place where that realization happens. And so, until we do, then we have this battle with resisting what's coming up and fighting it and fighting each other and fighting ourselves, etc., etc. Would you resonate with that?
Absolutely. And this is something that came to my mind as we were just discussing, and you're talking about this. It's a beautiful concept. And when people that I interact with, and I'm very passionate about nakshatras, today science actually confirms that we are star particles. We are made of star particles. We're completely star particles. We've all come from different galaxies, different elements that is making our body.
And do you know when we proved that?
When was that?
That was proved on, I think it was the 18th of August, 1862, on the beach in Thailand called Wako Beach. And
wow.
I write about that in here. I don't want to spoil the story. I know you're reading this.
Yeah, I'm reading this, and I think it's fascinating because you have covered the length and breadth of whatever our discussions is, and I can find all of that in this.
But let me tell you what that was. It was a man in the 1800s called Flammarion, who was a scientist and an astronomer in France, and he had this theory that we are made of stars, but there was no proof of that. Now, on this particular day, so in that period, in the 1800s, it was the navies of the world that, astronomy was, in fact, very much a mechanism in which we were proving our place in the cosmos in a very rigorous way. And there was a race on amongst nations to to be the lead in science. So France, America, England, and actually in this particular case, the Thai king that we know to be King Rama IV. We in the UK, I mean, you might know the story of The King and I. I don't know if you know, Yul Brynner played in this movie called The King and I, and it was a story about him and his relationship with his tutoress called Anna Leon Owens. She was Welsh, and she taught his children at the time. Okay, now he was a real scholar in Thailand. He was a real scholar, and he studied the Surya Siddhanta and
I've read that.
All those types of
and
things.
He was from the Navy, isn't it? The French Navy or something.
Well, he wasn't from the French Navy, but he invited the navies of the world because there was going to be an eclipse on this particular day. I think it was the 18th of August, 1862. And the French Navy was invited, the Americans, the British, and he himself was in competition with everybody. Was in competition with everybody. So he spent 3 years making this palace, massive palaces along a beach in Thailand, alongside a jungle, and this place was called Wako Beach, and it's still there. It's still there in Thailand. In fact, they study. I didn't realize this, but I learnt recently that they still study about this incident in Thai history even today. On that day, there was going to be a solar eclipse. And around that period, they had invented this thing called the spectrometer. And this was something that had been invented to analyze materials. It could be anything. Next to you was mostly, up till that day, they had only used the spectrometer to analyze something that was close by. And they had never used it to analyze something that was so far away as the sun. And that was the idea on this particular day, that they would use the spectrometer to analyze the flares of the sun, to understand what is causing the flares of the sun. And that was the first time they used, and they had all these theories that, the reason there's like solar flares and things burn on the sun is because, souls go off onto the sun to die, and, the souls are burning and stuff like that. So there were all these superstitious theories. But it was on that day that they discovered exactly what was causing the if you like, the scientific process that was going on, that was causing the flares of the sun. And it was done through using the spectrometer to analyze the flares, the solar flares. So it was on that day, as a result of that very experiment, in what I called it the midnight dawn, that they discovered that actually we are made of stars. They proved beyond any shadow of a doubt on that day that we are made of stars. I actually made a video on that beach called
Wow.
We Are Made of Stars, talking about, because this one of my past lives happens to be
in
that particular,
Wow.
involved in that particular event.
Now, this is fascinating for me, because once you see that you're made of stars, then you know that this is a very famous thing. I always say in all my lectures, as above, so below.
Yes.
As inside, so outside. So everything, what is happening above is happening here, because
Right.
we are just part and particle of
Macrocosm and microcosm. Yeah.
So the stars definitely, can. But at the same time, if you can inner engineer your stars within you, these diamonds within you,
Yes.
I think you should be able to overcome what is happening up there. I mean,
Right.
you completely come in synchronicity.
And that's what I think why understanding the constellations is, through Jyotish and so on, the divisional charts and so on, is really, really interesting, because it does give you a view into your own blind spots.